So layers and layer masks, they can be overwhelming. If you're new to Photoshop or you're not quite clear on what layers and layer masks are, I've got a tutorial for you that'll help you get up and running with layers and layer masks today, coming up. So first, let's explain what a layer is. A layer is simply one image stacked on top of another. So imagine I have a piece of paper and I paint it red. Then I take a piece of clear plastic and paint a yellow circle and lay it over the red piece of paper. And now if I take some blue type and lay that over the yellow circle, you could see that all the transparent areas of each piece of plastic that I laid over the other one show through all the way to the bottom layer, which is the red paper. So this is kind of how layers work in Photoshop. It's the concept. You're simply stacking one image over another. So there you have it. That's the concept of layers. Pretty simple, huh? Next, we'll go over the layers palette, which allows you to control the different features of layers in Photoshop. So this is an overview of the layers panel. This area is the layers panel. The layers panel in Photoshop lists all the layers. You can have a whole bunch of layers right here. Layer groups and layer effects in an image. You can use the layer panel to show and hide layers, create new layers, and work with groups of layers. And you can access additional commands and options in the layers panel menu. So up here is the layers panel menu. One thing I want to point out as a tip here, so this photo here I took while walking through Red Rock Canyon near Las Vegas, and this is the background layer, and this lock here means that you can't change the background layer. But now if I wanted to, if I just click on it, I could change the background layer any way I wanted to. But a best practice would be, or a good tip would be, to actually protect your background layer. Don't make any changes to it. So what you can do, I highly suggest this, is you could create a copy of this layer, your background layer, just by dragging it down to this icon right here, and it duplicates it. So that way you've protected your background layer in case you may need to go back to it at some point. So you saw me pull that background layer down to the icon down here to duplicate it. Well, you could also use shortcut keys, either Command J on the Mac or Control J on a PC, to copy a layer and duplicate it. So two ways to copy the layer there. If I wanted to delete this layer, I could pull it down to the trash can right here, and it's deleted. And I'll make a duplicate of it. Since I'm on a Mac, Command J. Wanted to point out that these eyes right here, you click on them and it's basically going to make the layer invisible. You have no visibility to that layer. So with this layers panel, there's a lot to it. But what I want to give you is examples where you can use layers and layer masks today So there's only a couple more things that I want to mention in the layers panel. This drop down here and these icons here are for filtering if you have a long list of layers, so that you can find the kind of layer you want by all these parameters. Not hugely needed, but it was highlighted there and I wanted to give you some background on it. So this drop down here is blending modes, which there's a whole lot to it, but it's something to play with, because what it does is when I drop down and change these values, its blending mode is going to show the interaction between this layer and the layer below it. So Photoshop, what it allows you to do is highlight each of these layers and you can see the effect on your photo. So, you know, if you may see something cool that you want to use, and like I say, there's a whole course that you can probably have on just blending modes, but let's choose this color dodge just for the heck of it. So you see the effect it has on the whole photo. You may like it, you may not, but say you like it, but you think it's too strong of an effect. Well, you can use the opacity slider to bring it down to a level that you may like. So it's something built in Photoshop that lets you be a little bit creative with that. Now down here, there's only one other thing that, well, we're going to go to work with layer mask after this, but these are adjustment layers, and they allow you to make adjustments to your photo, and it's a non-destructive way to adjust your photos to the way you like, because this layer up here, when you make an adjustment, it is having effect from the top layer down. It affects the one layer below. So this is a perfect place to have a little bit more explanation about layer masks, because what we're going to do is we're going to go through an example using layers, adjustment layers and layer masks to do something with this photo. It's summertime here, so you want to be able to get those photos and edit them a little bit. We're going to change the brightness a little bit, add a little bit of color, but we're going to use adjustment layers and layer masks. So let's get you a little explanation of layer masks now. So let's talk about how layer masks work in Photoshop. But first, I just want to go over our concept of layers really quickly, because I think it's valuable to show that layers are images that are stacked upon each other. And in our example, we had the red piece of paper, then putting the yellow circle with the plastic over it. You could see through the bottom because the yellow plastic, yellow circle on the plastic was transparent, so you could see the red in the bottom. Same with the text layer. It is transparent, and as we add the other layers below it, you could see that because they were on clear plastic, you could see all the way through to the red paper. So this leads us into the example where layer masks work. So what if you have two images on top of each other with no transparency? Well, that's where layer masks come in. So here we have the original background layer. We made a copy. I just call it trees. And then I brought in another photo and placed that photo on top of the trees layer, and I called it fence. You'll see why. So to create a layer mask, select a layer, and then down here is the layer mask icon. Just click that, and you now have a white layer mask. So what we're going to do is paint with the brush, B for the brush tool, come over here and change the foreground color to black, and make sure that our layer mask is selected. We don't want the properties, but if you click over here, that's the layer itself. But make sure you're clicked on the layer mask. You can see it's got a white boundary. And then what you could do is paint over. And as you can see, the layer below is coming through. We're painting with black on a white layer, so it is concealing the effect of the white layer. At the same time, it is showing you the transparency on the layer below. So as you can see, the picture totally changed. If I shift and click on the layer mask, it disables it, and you can see what it looked like before. This was the image before. Then we put the white layer mask, we painted with black. So now it's showing what's on the layer below. So this is the layers below. I added the image with the fence. That was what the image looked like before. Added your layer mask. It was white, so there was no effect. But when you paint black over it, it's revealing, and it's that transparency that is showing to the layer below. So here we've combined two layers, basically. Two different photos. We've combined them or blended them together to totally change this photo with the use of layers and layer masks. Now, if you wanted to do something different, say you didn't like this particular edit, you could right click, say you wanted to delete this layer mask and start again. Well, right click, delete layer. Or what you can do is select this layer, not the properties, select this layer and drag it down to the trash can and say delete when you're prompted here. So let's do something different. What you can also do is come down to this layer mask icon and press Alt and click And now the layer mask is black. So what you want to do is come over here and change the foreground color to white. And paint white, let's say right about here. Okay. It's not perfect, but what it did is painting white revealed where the fence is. You see that the fence, if you go shift and click, that is where it shows you the original version. Here is now a different picture where what we brought in is just the fence on that top layer, and we are showing through this bottom layer completely. See, that's the bottom layer, the layer above. We're showing everything on the bottom layer, except now you can see where the fence is just by painting white. So this white is revealing that portion of the layer where the layer mask is. And you're gonna hear this expression, and you probably already heard it, but it's gonna say something like black conceals and white reveals. So just trying to remember that, and an example would help you to get the layer mask usage straight in your mind. But so here's two photos. I mean, they're not retouched in any way or adjusted, but here we blended them together two different ways, changing the photos from the way they originally were. And that's okay, because maybe you want to be a little bit creative, but I kind of like the fence here in this scene. So let's move on to something else, another example where we're going to use adjustment layers. And we'll use this photo here. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and take down some of the brightness in the sky, say in the back of these hills here, and then add some color. But we're going to use the layer mask that these adjustment layers come with. So we'll do that next. Before we get into the next example, I wanted to show you something with the layers here. Because we blended these two images together, you may have a need to move the images, even though they're blended together with the layer mask. You may want to reposition things. So what you can do is type V for the move tool, or go up here to the top and click the move tool. You can see the little video there for that, little help video. But if I come over here and select a layer, I can move it. You see that? I can move it around to any other position. Then you can go back up to your layer mask and adjust it. But again, see, I'm moving the layer. And there may be a lot of times where you might want to do that, but just wanted to let you know that you can you can move those layers. There's the layer, the fence, and there's the background layer below. So that's just a bit on moving. Okay, so I was saying that none of these photos were adjusted in any way. They're straight out of the camera. But that's okay, because we can do some adjustments here. In fact, there's another type of layer. And if you come down here to this like half filled circle and click, these are what they call adjustment layers. So let's choose brightness and contrast. And as you see, it makes a white layer mask automatically. So what we can do is, I think what we could add here is take down some of the brightness of the sky and those hills back there. Make it a little bit more even to the foreground. So I can bring the brightness down a little bit. Maybe give it a little contrast, not too much. And we've made this adjustment. But it has affected the whole picture. Which, to mention, when you have an adjustment layer like that, it is affecting the layer below, or all the layers below that it sees through and has transparency. And so what we want to do is limit that adjustment we just made, that effect we just made. So what it did was it darkened the foreground here, the fence area, the trees. So what we can do, hit B for the brush tool, make sure that we're painting with black, because we want to hide that effect that this layer mask or this adjustment layer made, and hide that effect right here in front. So if I paint, you see it's getting lighter, painting black on that layer mask. Again, make sure that the layer mask is selected. You see the white border around it. So we are concealing, painting with black, we are concealing the effect that adjustment layer made. And we've kind of evening out the way this photo looks as far as brightness and contrast between the background here and the sky and the foreground. And you can use this eye to turn it on and off, and you can see the effect. So we've lowered that sky. It's not as bright, brought in a little contrast. We used the layer mask to conceal that effect so that effect does not show through. Down here on the bottom. And this is another example of using layer masks. Now there's a lot of other adjustment layers that you could have used to do this something similar like this, but that is the nature of Photoshop. There's more than one way to do something. So another example of using adjustment layers. In this case, let's choose the vibrance adjustment layer. So in case we want to, let's say we want to adjust this background and the sky, give it a little bit more color. It's best to use vibrance instead of saturation. There's all kinds of technical reasons for that, but it's highly recommended to use vibrance. So increasing the vibrance, you can see the sky is getting bluer. Those hills back there are getting a little greener. And right, the foreground, the bushes and trees are getting more saturated also. In this case, a good use of the layer mask that comes with the vibrance adjustment layer is now what I can do, say I think there's too much color in here. Looks fine back here in the background in the sky. I could paint with black on that adjustment layer and take off the effect that that vibrance adjustment layer has placed right here on the foreground. So the black color that is being brushed on now is concealing the effect of the vibrance adjustment layer and leaving all this nice blue and greens back here. And this is another example of using the adjustment layer, which is a different type of layer, and layer mask. If I turn this eye off, you can see how the background is blue, and there's some blues and greens back there. But you don't see it changing in the foreground down here by the fence because we've painted black to conceal the effect. Now we've introduced some adjustment layers, made some changes to our two photos that we've blended together. But if at any time we think that the effect is too strong, what you can do is highlight the layer that you want to reduce the effect. Say the vibrance, you thought it was too strong, and you can use the opacity slider to control how much you want to, say, lower that effect. If you were to think it was too strong, same with, you can go back to the brightness contrast adjustment layer, change the opacity there also. There's another way that is helpful, and if you select a layer and then shift and click the layer below, you've got those two layers selected. Hit Command G on a Mac, Control G on a PC, and it's going to group those layers together. You can name it anything. Adjustments, I'm going to call it. And if I wanted to reduce the effect on both my layers, my adjustment layers at the same time, I would highlight the top of the group, the adjustments group, and I could drop the opacity there too. And I could bring things down to some other level if I feel like I've overdone it. Now you have all the tools you need to start working with layers and layer masks in Photoshop right away. Now I have a question for you. Were layers and layer masks completely new for you, or did you know some of these things? Leave me a comment below. Thanks for checking out this video. Subscribe and click the bell if you haven't already. And remember, it's never too late to learn. See you in the next video.